All right, Chair, you can take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our nominating committee meeting where we going to be providing some updates on where we are and maybe a need to shift gears in a few areas and advance in a few other areas. But I want to be really clear that we're starting this meeting with the same expectation we had previously to close this nominating process and bring on new members to this board, the West End Opportunity Partnership Board in March. And so obviously we are about to close out the month of February. And that means it's about to be crunch time for us to close the loop on some of this work. And so with that, I want to provide an update on some of the nominators and kind of where we are falling short in a few areas. Yeah.
Before we jump in, I think it'd be helpful to maybe identify some other folks that are on the call with us today.
Sure.
So maybe giving an opportunity for board members to announce themselves, as well as neighborhood advisory council members who are present to announce.
Absolutely. I see David on. I don't know if they can take themselves off of mute though.
I'm taking them off as you call them.
Okay. David, you want to?
He's on his iPhone, David James. There you go.
Hello. Yep. David James, and I serve as the interim chair of the West End Opportunity Partnership. I'm glad everybody's here.
Thank you for joining us, David. It also looks like, where did he go? Gerald's on. Gerald, how you doing, my friend? He's still on mute. You're on mute, Gerald. Hold on a second.
There you go, Gerald.
Yep. Good morning, everyone. My name is Gerald Joyner. I am on the advisory board. I represent the Shining community. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, sir. Who else are we missing here?
Crystal Jones is on.
Crystal?
Yes, there she is.
There she is. Okay, I see it.
Advisory board.
How you doing? Good to see you.
Nice seeing you
we
guys.
corresponded by email, but good to see you.
Nice seeing you too.
Thank you.
We have David Kaplan.
Yeah, I'm David Kaplan. I'm the appointed nonprofit foundation representative on the board, serving a one-year term that ends this summer.
Very good. And
Jeff O'Brien.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Jeff O'Brien, Chief of Louisville Forward.
Jeff, you can unmute, Jeff.
Sorry about that, you all. Jeff O'Brien, I'm the Chief of Louisville Forward and the ex officio member of the West End Opportunity Partnership Board. Louisville Forward is the city's economic development agency. Good to be with you all this afternoon.
Thank you for being on with us today, Jeff. And I do see, and I'll recognize them in some of these comments along the way, several people who have agreed to serve as nominators. So it's good to see them on with us today too. If there's anyone else that joins along the way, looks like folks are still joining. Just give me a nudge, Gina or Rita. I'm happy to acknowledge them as well, but also just want to pause again to recognize the committee members that are on with us. Celine is on, Jennifer, good to see you this morning, Gina as well. And I saw an email from Frank not too long ago, and I'm hoping that he'll be able to join us this morning as well. So I spent a minute or two just kind of talking about where we are and what we had anticipated doing to keep this process moving. The idea for us was to create neighborhood nominating groups that would essentially vet candidates from their respective communities, the non-West Louisville communities, and offer back to this committee their recommendations on who they believe would best represent their communities. And we would introduce as a committee a slate of candidates for the West End Opportunity Board, the collective board, to vote on in our March meeting so that we might get those remaining 9 seats filled. And so we set out to fill those neighborhood nominating committees for each respective community, and have found ourselves coming up short in a few of those communities. And I'll share with you what we have. Algonquin, right now, the only person that we have slated to serve in that role is Sandra Hughes, who is a West End Opportunity Partnership Advisor appointed by the governor. And so still no community members to be that we've identified to serve in that capacity beyond Sandra. We do now have a second person in California. Dreamer Jackson for a while served as the single person who stepped up to serve as a nominator for the California community. And now Ms. Adrian Johnson has agreed to serve in that role as well. So we're excited that she's agreed to participate. The Chickasaw community, we have Marty Davis, Kara Mackey, and Terry Mitchell. The 3 of them will serve as a nominating committee there. Tiffany Jones, Crystal Jones, and I don't know if it's how it's pronounced, Tija Jackson will be our representatives from the Park Duval community. In Park Hill, we only have one person represented there to serve, and that's Joy Ritchie. And in the Parkland neighborhood, Tamika Jackson has agreed to serve there, and we still have 2 outstanding spots that need to be filled. In Portland, we have a full slate. That's Rick Thomas, Larry Stoles, and Judy Schroeder, who I believe is on. I saw her name on here today. The Russell neighborhood, I think I saw Lisa Wilson's name. She's agreed to serve. David Duncan has agreed to serve. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Miss Jackie Floyd has stepped down from her obligation. Is that, am I remembering that correctly? And so there's still a seat potentially that needs to be filled there. And in the Shawnee neighborhood, we have Gerald Joyner, who's on with us today. Miss Pat Matheson and John Mays have agreed to serve as nominators from that committee. And Gina, I believe I might be missing one. Am I missing one? I think you had, no, I think that's it. I think that was it. I had that right. And so we have a few seats left to fill, but because we are committed to completing this process by our March board meeting, the West End Opportunity Partnership Board meeting, my recommendation to our committee is that where we find we have voids and short of 3 candidates to do the vetting in those communities, that we work as a committee to support those communities by offering to serve in one of those particular roles, and not continue this hunt to try to get people to fill those spots, but to just step in as advisors, as members of this committee to round out that work. And so that would be the Algonquin community. We need 2 people there. We'll need somebody to step in and serve in a support role in California. And Park Hill, we need 2 people. And in Parkland, we'd need 2 people. And we'd need 1 in Russell, and we're good in Shawnee. And so we can talk about how we do that as a committee. I mean, I have no problem doing serving in dual roles with a number of these committees. The good news is that we do have a rubric that Gina had created for us that I think could help simplify this process and figure out kind of what candidates rank higher based on that rubric, and then do some background, some just kind of resume and application vetting of our own. I see Frank's joining us here. Reverend Smith, thank you for jumping in with us today, sir. And so, so that's my recommendation to our committee. I don't know that right now we need to divvy that up
Um,
Go ahead,
Devon,
Gina.
I have a response to that, sort of an alternative plan that, the committee can think through.
Okay.
But I guess the reason we went with the nominator process is so that we ourselves were not, ultimately or unilaterally making these decisions. And so you're right, it has been a challenge to find the number of nominators we were seeking. But it's also been interesting to see how the applications are playing out for the neighborhoods. Some neighborhoods have a lot, some
Yeah.
have very few. I would propose another alternative where, since we've got so many committed people who have agreed to be nominators, maybe we could just combine nomination committees, right? So, like, um, for the neighborhoods that have very few applications to review, to
Mhm.
pool those neighborhood committees, right? And still we're getting, insights from people who are rooted in the neighborhood, and reviewing, based on the same sort of criteria that we laid
Mhm.
out. But
Mhm.
I think that would keep a good arm's length between us as well, and not, like I say, owning that entire,
Mhm.
deliberation, that community members are really still lifted up and prioritized in making their recommendations. Is that
I-
clear what I'm
Yeah, no,
suggesting?
it's very clear. It's very clear. I think, we just have to make sure that those nominating committees that we merge are okay with that, because that was not what we originally asked of them. I get the impression, at least the ones that I've talked to, that probably won't be a problem. I think, well, let me stop before I go any further and just kind of ask what the other committee members think of that proposal from Gina, rather than us ourselves kind of jumping in the middle of that process to see if we can merge those two together.
I think
Right.
that's the best way to move forward.
Mhm. Okay.
I agree.
I would say that I think whatever we can do to maintain the integrity of what we've tried to accomplish in letting the neighborhoods have a say, we should still do that. But I do think what Gina is proposing is an idea to expedite. We've got to get ahead and adapt and be flexible enough to kind of move the needle here. We've given ample time for folks to respond. That's documented. So, I think that we should do all that we can to keep the community engaged in selecting these members with whatever adaptabilities we need to do. If it's combining the nomination folks and committees, I'm open to that.
Okay. So maybe what would help us then, Gina, is if you share with us an update on the application status, so we can get a sense of where we're strong and where we're short, and then maybe we can consider what makes sense in terms of merging the nominating committee, so we know where there's a need.
Absolutely. Let me prepare to share my screen here.
Mhm.
Okay, can everybody see the PowerPoint?
Sure
Okay,
can.
great. So this is a status update. Just to catch up some folks from some more recent decisions. We had originally closed the application portal and decided to reopen it. And so it will remain open until midnight on March 1st. But as of yesterday, we had 64 applications submitted. The average length of residency for those applicants is 15 years and 9 months, ranging from as short a period as 9 months to 49 years. The average age remains steady at around 48 years old, with applicants as young as 25 and as seasoned as 79. Ethnicity, majority people of color, but different people, identify some as American descendants of slaves, African American, Black American, biracial, Black and Cherokee. We do have 2 people that did not respond to that question, and the balance being white applicants. Gender, I do apologize for not asking specifically on our application for people to indicate either their pronouns or their gender identity. So just going by names, roughly we see the balance, the majority of applicants are female at about 62%. In terms of owning or renting the home, the majority are home owners with about 15, almost 16% being renters. Some people said that they were in neither category, so I find that interesting, while others are transitioning more or less from renter status into home ownership status. In terms of business owners, we've got 12.5% that own their business and lease their space. 26, almost 27% own their business and own the building that they do business in. 26.6 also own and operate a business with no physical space. And then 34% do not own a business. We had listed some desirable professional expertise, thinking about the nature of the work that the partnership is going to be doing moving forward, with an emphasis in real estate issues. And so here you can see the distribution, are people indicating that they possess those expertise. I did make note that we have no applicants indicating that they have appraiser, evaluation, or engineering expertise. We also wanted to understand people's comfort level with using different forms of communication. So email and audio conferencing and video conferencing seem to be pretty familiar to those who applied, maybe a little less so on cloud-based computing, but we are prepared and committed to getting people's comfort level up and meeting them where they are, regardless of how they feel at the front end. Neighborhood applicants. So here you'll see we have 6 applicants from Chickasaw, 18 applicants from Shawnee, 3 from Park Hill, 6 from Park Duval, 4 from Portland, 3 from Algonquin/Hallmark, 7, I don't know if I said there, Portland versus Parkland, 7 from Parkland, 9 from Russell. And we did have 1 application submitted for California. Recently, that application was withdrawn, leaving us with no applicants requesting to represent or fill the board seat for California. And so this is just a review of our intended process that, based on Devon's overview, shows you that we're fluid, we're trying to be flexible, but at this point, like I say, the application portal online will close on March 1st. We are short of 3 nominees for each neighborhood, but as soon as we as a committee decide how to handle that, then we'll be going into scheduling an orientation for everyone, and we'll touch on that later on in this conversation. But I'll go back to this slide because I think it's informative for the proposition we have before us to combine neighborhood nominating committees. And I can take any questions if there are any.
Oh, this is good. And so Gina, again, reference again the 6 other applications.
So when we were testing out the application, we asked board committee members to fill it in. So the other is from board members who literally don't live in the West End, myself included. But it just shows up in the analytics when we do this. And it's like Reverend Smith has questions, comments.
I wanted to raise another thought. I recalled that there is supposed to be a youth representative that is a part of this board, and I don't know that we have discussed that matter, and then that there is apparently no one that has expressed interest in California. I wondered if that could be the neighborhood that we target for a young person, but the statute did call for some means of getting a person of a certain age range to be a part of this board.
Rita, can you clarify what that requirement is in the
It's
statute?
18 to 30.
18 to 30. Okay.
So we do have some 25 to 79 is the age range. So we do have someone
Mm-hmm.
apparently between 25 and 30, or some ones.
Yes. And what
Um,
I can do is go into the data and see, I guess, what the neighborhood representation is for those 30 and under, and bring that into our orientation, perhaps, just so that we know what that's looking like, if that would be helpful.
okay.
Hey, Rita, Devon is muted. Could you unmute him?
Sorry about that. I accidentally muted myself and couldn't get back on. So 18 to 30, and so we've got candidates in the pipeline who fit that demographic, which is encouraging, and could help us fill our void. And we look at this and try to determine what it is we ultimately need to accomplish. What we're really trying to set out to accomplish is filling 9 vacant seats. And the legislation does say 1 from each of the 9 neighborhoods, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so we clearly have a void there, but we also need to fill a role that has a young person the age of 18 to 30. And so the good news is we've got someone in the pipeline to fit that demographic. And then we also have an African-American representation commitment to fulfill for this board as well. And it looks like we should be able to achieve that relatively easy based on at least the applications that are in the pipeline. And so those are the 3 things that we need to make sure we fill. Am I missing anything there? Age, 1 from each community, and African-American demographic.
Sounds good.
Just making a note. Okay. So one of the things that has crossed my mind, just in the event that we do find ourselves unable to fulfill the California position, is that we still proceed with the process, because what we will have at that point is enough to establish a quorum for the West End Opportunity Partnership Board to allow us to continue, or to begin, I should say, to do official business. Because at this point, we aren't even in a position to do official business because we don't have a fully established board, or at least a board established well enough to function as a quorum. We could, if again, no one surfaces in between now and the time that we go through this process to fill the California seat, circle back around and go through another process of trying to identify someone to fill that position. But I don't want that to stop us in this work that we're doing now. We're so close, and we have the ability to get ourselves to a point where we can establish a quorum and begin to do some really important work, that I don't want that to be the thing that deters us from moving forward. So I want to make sure that you guys are okay with that process and allow us to continue to move forward in the event that no one does in between now and March 1st surface as a candidate for the California community. Thoughts?
Sounds good.
Agreed.
Devon, if I might share this bit of information,
Mhm.
the 21 seats that are set by the legislation requires that we have no more than 21 seats. And I've clarified this with the legislators. So in other words, as we move forward to get these 9 neighborhood members on board, if one of the neighborhoods require more work, we are within the guidelines to go ahead and vote in whatever number we have, because we're required to have up to 21 members, no more than that. And whatever that number is, if it's 18, 20, 17, by legislation, the majority, is what rules the day. So it will not prevent, if you have to put more work into California, it will not prevent you from moving forward. It's what I'm trying to communicate.
Very good, very good, very good. And I'm hoping someone does surface from California. I mean, that'd be nice. But if in the event that that doesn't happen, we'll move forward and then figure out how to circle back around to fill that position, just so that we can keep this process moving and begin to do some business as an official board. So with that, Gina, then let's talk about where it might make sense for us to merge some of these nominating committees. Obviously, California, we have, we're one short of a full nominating committee, 3 members, but they don't have any applications. And so I think it obviously makes sense to merge them with another nominating committee. And I'm looking and recognize that Algonquin only has 1 advisor right now. And so combining those 2 together get us a full 3 members on a nominating committee. That would make sense. I can't remember, forgive me, Gina, what if we had a robust number of applicants from Algonquin. Do you have that number?
Yeah, I'm gonna pull that back up. So
I'm sorry. Okay, good. And so that would give them, the 3 of them, 3 applications as of today to review and respond to. Any thoughts on that?
That's good.
Okay. And then let me take another look here. So that's Algonquin and California. And then I would recommend, again, based on those who've responded to serve as neighborhood nominators, to merge Park Hill and Parkland, those 2. And it looks like actually we only have 1 of each, so we still need to see if we can find another one.
Park Duval.
Park Duval has a full board, a full nominating committee.
Okay.
And so I'm just looking at this. I'm going back and forth here. Give me a second.
Gina, can you show the nominating committee?
I have that up on mine, but
Okay.
and so we have 1 from Park Hill, 1 from Parkland, and everything else is full. Everything else is fully seated. We've got 3 from each of those. And so if we could get someone from one of the other ones to support what's happening in Parkland and Park Hill to join that nominating committee, I think that would suit us well. So if I'm looking here, we've got Park Hill and Parkland. The 2 of them have a total, at least as of now, 10 applications to review. And then
Could I ask a question about what I see here on the screen about the applicants, other? What does, you may have mentioned this, Gina, but what's the makeup of other?
It's us, sir. It's the board members who don't live in the West
Oh.
End or responded to the test we did before we opened it up to the public.
Oh, okay, okay.
It's us.
I know where you were going, Frank. I know where you were going. I wanted to go there earlier too.
Lisa Wilson has volunteered.
Beautiful, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
So we would merge Parkland. I'm just making a note. Park Hill. And add Lisa Wilson to that mix. And I think that has us set. I think that has us set. And so the next thing we would need to do after that, well, we need to get through March 1st because that's when the portal closes, correct, Gina?
Yes, sir.
And then get ourselves prepared to schedule an orientation meeting with the nominators to kind of talk them and walk them through this process. So let me fast forward a little bit just so I can work the clock backwards in my head. When is our March WEOP board meeting? What day is that scheduled for?
Devon, could we maybe ask Jennifer to walk us through the timeline? That'll start with the March meeting and then work our way back. just to
Absolutely.
get that overview.
To do that. So Devon, this may be a little bit of catch up for you because I know you weren't able to join us at the last meeting. So let's make sure you're comfortable with where we landed. We could not secure the West Louisville YMCA for the 26th. So it looks like we're looking at March 28th, Monday, 4 to 6 p.m. for the next full board meeting. Our hope is it's at that meeting that we can elect the new officers. So backing up from there, what we're proposing is that the week of March 21st, that we go ahead as this committee meet and make our selections for the recommendations of the 9, assuming we can get to 9. And I believe, I'm going to look now, I proposed a date for that. March 21st, a lunchtime meeting. I would host it at VOA. It would be a working lunch where we would review the recommendations from the nominators and then vote to make our recommendations to the interim board.
Okay.
And so backing up from there, the week of March 14th, all of the nominations are due to this committee so that we have 1 week to review the accompanying materials. Now, I do think that we need to decide today, are we going to simply receive a recommendation? Do we want to meet with the nominators and hear the narrative around the nomination? Right, so I do
I'd
think
like to.
points.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we want to invite them to if they want to submit the names in advance the week of the 14th and then invite them to the working lunch meeting on the 21st so that we can have more of a dialogue and discussion. So I think that's a decision we need to make today. And then backing up from there, we need, now that we have the nominators in place, I'm going to send a doodle to the group with dates for one orientation session for the nominators that will be conducted between March 4th and March 6th. That's next weekend. We backed into that, Devon, because we had some discussion around doing 2 separate times to have some flexibility, and then decided that it was best that we have one orientation, that we record it for those who can't be present, so that we're saying the information only one time to the audience. And then backing up from there, the portal closes, all applications are due on March 1st. Did I capture that okay, Celine and Gina, Reverend Smith?
I think
From the
so.
last
Yes.
discussion?
Yes, excellent.
Okay, so I think the decisions today, we need to determine the process by which we'll receive the recommendations, how dynamic we want that to be in terms of interaction with the nominators. I think more is better. I'll just put my own personal opinion out there. And would welcome a larger group to VOA on the 21st for lunch discussion and ultimately a vote to recommend the neighborhood representatives to the full board on March 28th.
Or could we do a hybrid if people can't be there in person? and
Sure,
create a virtual
we absolutely
opportunity for them to
can.
patch into that meeting? Mhm.
Absolutely can, for sure.
I love that. I love that. So we would need then to, I mean, I don't know that it has to be overly complicated about how they recommend. Maybe we have one person commit to that, just kind of serve as the leader, and that person, after they have collectively vetted those applications, respond back to us. But it would be good, even after they respond, to have some detailed interaction with them to get a sense of why they made the recommendations that they did.
Okay, great. And then we can have a template that each group uses to submit their nominee, just so that we have some consistent information, who they've selected, maybe a
Yeah.
little narrative around why they selected that person, why they think that person is the ideal candidate. So that if we could receive those the week of March 14th, and then be prepared for the discussion on March 21st.
I like that. I'm making a note here. I like that too.
Okay. And
Jennifer,
then
someone brought forward, I don't know if it was a comment from one of the meetings from a guest on here when we were talking, but someone brought forward a caution point of making sure, and I can't phrase it right now in my recollection, but making sure that the nominators were indeed looking at who they were nominating objectively, inclusively, who really has skin in the game in that community. I can't remember who brought this up, but it's coming back to mind that we wanted to make sure was a part of the orientation. And I don't know if Devon was in that meeting or not, but does anyone else remember what I'm talking about? Celine, you might. I don't know. I thought it was a worthy point that we wanted to keep before us.
I think that the conversation was about offering like a scoring guide that reflects the system that was created as far as looking at the different percentages of like, are you a renter versus an owner, things like that. So that's the objective measure that folks can use to review applications, but then providing a space for them, maybe like if they have additional information to provide, like, we know this individual has shown great commitment to the community in this the way and that way. They can also add some subjective evaluations or just feedback for us as well, just so we can combine those things. So with the training that we do next weekend, whatever template that we're providing the nominators to score each applicant, we provide a space for that objective and subjective feedback.
So I like that only because we talked about this before, and I want to make sure it's clear to everyone, especially when we do the orientation, that Gina's prepared this beautiful rubric for us that allows us to help kind of score and potentially kind of rank people based on the demands of the legislation. But there's also some subjective insight that we want to make sure we take into consideration as well, so people don't feel like that they're solely ranked on how they come out of that rubric ranking. So that makes a lot of sense to me, and I think that makes it kind of justifies what we just mentioned, Jennifer. You want to make sure that people have an opportunity to explain why they selected who they selected, so that we can really get a sense of what their value is for the board.
that sounds terrific. I really like that.
Yep.
And I'm making a note of what Dr. Smith laid out to emphasize that during the orientation.
Great.
And again, to remind people that the rubric is not meant to determine the nominee. In fact, oftentimes our data and rubric can be biased and prejudiced and skewed, right? So if the people in their gut feel like that they've got the candidate, even if
Right.
that person has the lowest score,
Right.
we're
Right.
okay with that, which
Right.
is why Jennifer's, inclusion of our, subjective measures on the template will be so important. I also wanted to back up to another community request to know the names of all the applicants. I have since that time been reaching out to the applicants to get their consent. Probably heard back from around half of the people. So for those who have indicated that they're comfortable being identified, we will list their name and neighborhood on the website. I think if we can work with Rita to get that done, and also share that information at the orientation as well. Of course, the nominators will see everybody's information in full. I'm planning to create a packet for each nominating committee that includes the overview of the data, and reminds us of the requirements per the statute in terms of age and ethnicity, and then the sheet, candidate profile with the responses they gave and how they stack up against the rubric. Just thinking beyond that, beyond March 14th, when we get the nominations, we are probably going to want to gather, in a sense, a bio or a biography, from the candidates. I mean, I could take what they have, in the submission, but maybe I can circle back to those final nominees and ask them to confirm that that's how they want to be presented when we get to the board. Does that sound agreeable to everybody?
Yeah, I think that'd be great to have a bio so that we can really kind of dig into who they are and share that, not just with our board members, other board members, but when this process is clear, it'd be good for us to have that to communicate to the public as well, who's joining the board.
Devon, I know it's not time necessarily for questions, but Crystal was responding to Gina's narrative.
I was also thinking that we should probably put a ability to communicate effectively part on the rubric, because we need people who have a voice, that know how to voice their opinion, that know how or to be comfortable public speaking, rather than someone that's going to be shy, silent, shallow, or speak uneducated.
I totally understand where you're coming from, Ms. Jones. The challenge with that is how to measure.
Right. Right.
So,
Right.
that's one of those subjective characteristics that I personally would recommend that you bring that into the discussion with your fellow
Right.
nominators.
Right.
Okay.
Because another thing that came up at our last meeting was, okay, to what degree should the nominators be reaching out to the candidates? Right? Like, do nominators want to have a short interview with the candidates, like actually speak to them? Because to your point, that would give you the best indication of how well that person communicates. But I don't think we had decided on requiring or requesting that every committee do that. What were you saying, Ms. Jones?
I was just seeing how well versed they were, being that we are in the West Louisville. I've been to some meetings with the mayor where, when people are trying to get out what they're saying, it doesn't come out quite well. And I just wanted to see if that was, something that we could add to the criteria. That was all.
Well, I agree with Gina that that is a responsibility I would put on the nominators to assess the candidates that you guys are interviewing or vetting and determine whether or not they serve as a representative you would want to have for that community. I mean, that to me is a responsibility where, I mean, that's one of the reasons why we're calling together these nominators to help make some of those decisions for us.
Okay.
But I hear you loud and clear, Crystal.
I think that's great feedback, Crystal. Thank you.
Is there anything else? Because I wanted to shift gears then to talk a little bit about the orientation and what we would bake into that process. So before I shift gears, I'll back up a little bit and just kind of walk through this timeline one last time to make sure we have it. March 1st, the application portal is going to close, correct?
Yes.
The 4th through the 6th, we are going to schedule an orientation meeting. We're looking for a date to do that. And did we say that was going to be done virtually?
Yes.
Okay. Right, because we're going to record it, I'm sorry. March 14th, all nominations are due to this committee from the nominating committees. And so that gives them time to process, to vet the applications, and if they so desire, schedule interviews potentially with the candidates. And we will then meet on the 21st to review those nominations and hear from the nominating committees about why they submitted those respective individuals. And on the 28th, our board ultimately vote on the candidates that we submit to them after our March 21st meeting.
Devon, can I jump in and make this one point? I'm looking at the calendar. If our training doesn't occur until, let's say, the end of next weekend, what if we made their recommendations due to us on March 18th? We said the week of March 14th, but I'm going to suggest March 18th because that will enable them 2 full weeks, because they may want to have some virtual or in-person interviews.
Sure.
And that might be difficult to get scheduled in 1 week. So if they could have 2 weeks, then we could take the weekend, if we can just proactively carve out some time the weekend of March 18th, 19th, 20th, to be prepared to review what's been submitted to us. We're basically looking at 9 documents. So hopefully that won't take long, so that we're prepared for the discussion on the 21st. What do you all think about that?
I think 2 weeks is ideal.
Okay.
Yes, a great idea. And I was just thinking, as you were saying, would Rita be the person to be at each of the processes? That sounds like a lot of work on one person, but I do think to shepherd the process, or someone being able to answer any questions beyond what the trained nominators may be able to answer, who would be the technical assistants to each of these meetings, so that they can go with, we don't have to have a lot of doubling back. Well, the person wanted to know this, person wanted to know that.
Well, my hope is, Frank, that we would be able to use the orientation meeting to help kind of lay the groundwork and set the expectation, and get them off and running there, and let them, what I don't want to do is over prescribe the process. Ideally, I'd like to have the community have room and flexibility to come to certain conclusions without us being overly prescriptive. And so I think we use that orientation to set, some expectations. There's some, again, the legislation is going to require certain things. So we need to make sure that they are aware that there's certain things that we are trying to accomplish with this task. But beyond that, I'm okay with letting them determine what path works best for them. I mean, again, these are folks who know their communities and are going to walk through a process of trying to figure out who best represents them. I think what we can do is ask that Rita be accessible and available should they need to circle back around and ask a question or two. But I wouldn't necessarily require or want to require that any one of us have to be in their meetings when they meet regularly.
Yeah, well, it's mainly the technical support piece is what I'm talking about. However, that's done, if it was too much on Rita to be accessible to each group. But I do see some wisdom in making sure that the nominators feel supported as they go through their process. And that's all I would.
Yeah, I'm here from an administrative support standpoint, whatever, we need to do. A lot of times people will circle back by email, like when we sent the packets out to the database, they'll circle back. And as you all know, I've been, included the committee in those responses, or if people need to call, whatever you all need me to do to support in that effort, then I stand ready to get in where I fit in terms of what you need.
Thanks.
Very good. Thank you, Rita.
There was a question from Mr. Joyner about the training session or the orientation, as we're calling it. And I was just going to run through an outline of what I think we need to cover, especially based on what we've decided here.
Beautiful.
So, Devon, we have now 7 nominating committees. Is
Yes.
my math right?
Mhm.
Okay. So there'll be 7 nominating committees. We'll identify the neighborhoods included in that committee, as well as the members of that committee. We will review the timeline, which has now been determined that the nominations are due on March 18th. We will review the nomination template that I'm hoping Jennifer will develop and design for that orientation. We'll review the principles, really, things like Dr. Smith just outlined about being objective as possible, inclusive, and really trying to, things like communication, how well people, can articulate, as well as are they really vested in the community. Then we would share the rubric, which again is just a guideline, share the data, the overview of all the applicant pool. We would share the candidate profiles and make sure everybody can understand the information that's included in their packet with regard to the candidate profiles, which will vary based on the number of applications for each committee. We'll talk about privacy and protecting people's information, right? So if the committees want to reach out and be in touch, we're asking that they treat people's information with consideration and thoughtfulness, things like that, and then emphasize that Rita will be available to them as a point of contact throughout that 2-week deliberation process. Anything that I didn't touch on that we think should be included when we have everyone together, and that will be recorded.
As far as the option for nominators to potentially reach out to applicants for interviews and things like that, I feel like we may want to clarify a little bit about what that would look like, because if there's not a lot of a framework we can offer or some guidance we can offer as far as what those interviews look like, what questions can be asked and cannot be asked, what questions are appropriate to ask a candidate, what are not appropriate to ask a candidate. I think that could get a little bit difficult to manage. And so I think that as we do the orientation next weekend, we should really think about that and figure out. And the other thing that came up, I didn't communicate, was that, say, for example, they want to interview everyone and there's not enough time to interview. The Shawnee neighborhood had 18 applications. And so that in 2 weeks, I'm not sure how the nominating committee would even be able to get through that. So just for that particular portion of the nominators' duties, I think we should just maybe think about that a little bit and see if we're going to say that that's something nominators can do to provide some guidelines and some support for that, or to decide that nominators should really stick to the information that's been shared already to make it as consistent as possible across the board. So just wanted to point that out as we kind of refine or further develop what the orientation will look like.
Good points. On the one hand, because I agree with Devon, we don't want to be overly prescriptive, right, but we also want to be practical and pragmatic. Right. So maybe we say, do your best, and at most, if you want to touch base with people, that maybe you limit that to your top 3, perhaps.
Maybe, yeah.
Say don't attempt to schedule more than 3. And
And
then Celine, maybe would you be willing to maybe, I guess, lay out a document, some points of, lines that you absolutely should not be crossed?
yeah, I can come up with just a template that shows like interview questions that are not really appropriate, and then some suggestions for interview questions that are appropriate to ask.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Devon, there in the chat, Gerald Joyner has a question about non-disclosure. Gerald, I've asked you to come off mute if you want to expound on that, but that's an excellent question.
Mhm.
The question comes is for those who are on the nominating committee, should they sign non-disclosure agreements as to protect the privacy of those who have submitted applications?
Yeah, I personally don't have a problem with that. I think it's a good idea, Gerald, just to make sure that the people who have submitted applications know that their information is protected and that, this is a confidential process.
Yeah, to specify that it won't be shared outside of like conversations with the development committee
Mhm.
and things like that.
I might suggest, and I don't know, because you can go down a rabbit hole in non-disclosure agreements. So you want to make sure it's going to be something very simple. David Kaplan, would you mind just maybe speaking to that? David is on our board and he is an attorney.
You repeat that, please, the question?
Gerald, Mr. Joyner is suggesting that perhaps the nominators might want to sign a non-disclosure agreement to protect the privacy of the information of the applicants. And what I was saying is that you can really get into a whole lot of stuff with non-disclosure. So is it possible to come up with something very simple, paragraph or two for?
Yeah,
this
you can make it as simple as you want to. It's just a question of, whether it's something that you would ever seriously intend to enforce, or in which case, you have to add more bells and whistles to it, injunctive relief, that type of thing. I would think that in this context, if you're just trying to emphasize to the person that they are receiving information that could be confidential, personal, sensitive, and you're just trying to reinforce that to them and communicate the importance of that, then you can, I have some samples that are less than a page long that some restaurants have their employees sign, that type of thing, that aren't complicated non-disclosures like you would have in a commercial business transaction. So I'd be happy to share, a simple form that might be appropriate for this purpose.
Thank you, David. I think that would be excellent.
Thank you, Rita.
Committee.
That was a great idea.
Could I raise?
Who should I give
point?
that to?
Rita, you can start with Rita and she'll make sure she gets it. Correct.
Yes, thanks.
Could I raise a point about, though, this being a public process? How would this non-disclosure, how is it in conjunction with the public nature of this board?
I think
When I talked about privacy in my rundown, like for example, people's phone numbers are in their application. The last thing I would want is for, for it to get out via the nominating committee where they're posting somebody's phone number on social media and then they become the targets of something. There are addresses, and you're right. Like when we publish the names of the applicants, my intention was to be as minimal as possible with name and neighborhood. There's at least one applicant who did not feel comfortable with her name and neighborhood being on because she lives alone and she was afraid people might find her house and do things, particularly because there's so much tension and somewhat animosity around this process. So, I agree with David that this is really more of a good faith gesture. Right. And that I would love to have people, sign so that they wouldn't do anything that compromises people who are stepping up to the plate to be active, to discourage them or to harm them with the information that they do have.
Yeah.
I would just add to that. I agree with everything Gina just said, and just to make a distinction too between our obligations as a public agency to disclose public records. That wouldn't be affected by this. We're subject to the Open Records Act. The type of information Gina's talking about can be removed, redacted, if it qualifies as confidential information, the disclosure of which would constitute an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy.
Right.
So that's something that, you know, Rita, I know, is on the lookout for. So if somebody signed this agreement, I mean, they're not a public agency. They're just somebody who we've asked to perform a service. They can be subject to confidentiality. If we get a request for these forms under the Open Records Act, we'd have to do a separate analysis of what we can and cannot produce under the open record, or what we have to produce, and whether we can withhold anything.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that the whatever we come up with should be more focused on protecting the data of the candidates. But if nominators want to talk about what their experience was, what they thought about, like what, you know, how they decided on who was the best representative, I don't think that would be inappropriate to share information like that, like transparency on that level.
I agree.
So David, you're going to get a one pager to Rita that we could vet prior to our orientation meeting.
Yeah, I can get that right over, and it's, you know, it's just up to, there's no particular rules to it. I mean, you'll see what's in there. You just have to decide how expansive you want it to be. It could be as much as the information you've received on any document, or it could be information you've received in any interviews. And it could just almost be like a use restriction. Anything you learn in this process should be used purely in the execution of your duties that you volunteered to do, and shouldn't be used for any other purpose. You know, that's, I think, would kind of be the gist of it, which seems fair to me, that should be an understanding,
Very good.
without scaring anybody into thinking they're going to trip up just because they, you know, say something, you know, in a meeting or something like that. Or
And I just think, Devon, I was going to say, I think it's good right now to help people to understand, because sometimes when we have these meetings, people leave with this takeaway, you know, it's like, oh, I have a legal document that I've got to sign to do this. But as much as we can expound, David, and like you were sharing about what this is just for this period that they're doing these applications. It's not something that goes beyond that, and it's just the protection of the privacy or the personal data of the information. So beyond that, it's not going to be something that's going to follow people beyond this 2-week process. And I think it's important for people to understand that.
Okay. So looks like Reverend Smith needs to leave here shortly. Do we need to wrap up anything real quick before he's, well, I guess we didn't get a chance. Okay, very good. So we can get that part, and I think that makes sense, and I think we can explain that. I can't imagine that'd be a huge hang up for us, but we can explain that in the orientation meeting why we're doing that, and what we're hoping to accomplish by having them sign that. That should be relatively easy to do. Thank you for that recommendation, Gerald. And so, Gina, I think that rundown of topics to discuss for the orientation meeting is spot on. I think that's exactly what's going to help us move the needle with this conversation and keep things going. So we'll do that virtually. We'll record it and make that accessible and available to the ones who aren't available to attend. Now, the other thing that I want to make sure we communicate to them is that, again, in the spirit of not being overly prescriptive, is that they then gather to determine when and how to meet, where to meet, those sort of things. Again, I don't want to get in those details with them, but give them a timeline of when we need that information back from them, and let them figure out how they get from point A to point Z, and to get that back to us. And again, make sure that we, by way of Rita, are accessible and available to them if they have questions or needs that we can help them with. But we'll set the stage, give them what they need to move the process forward, and then let them determine how to navigate forward as a nominating committee from that point. That sound all right? Okay,
Good.
good deal. Looks like we're on our way to having a full board set real soon. I like that. Anything else we miss, we need to discuss for this, for the
I
purpose? of
popped
this
into
meeting?
the chat box. I can email this too. Just a draft document of the nomination form
Mhm.
for us to review. We might also just make a reminder that we want the nominators to send those to Rita so that she could collect those, and if she'd be so kind to just send us a packet of 9 documents. So we could also include that instructions of where those documents are to be emailed.
Very good.
But feel free to edit that and I'll get it fixed up and ready to release at our orientation meeting.
Okay.
And for anyone who needs the application, I think Bentley put the link in the chat as well.
So the one thing that I'm not clear on that we didn't, I don't know that we hammered down or why we didn't hammer it down was the specific orientation day. I know we said between the 4th and the 6th, but we didn't identify a particular day.
Right, Devon, I think what we'll do there, Rita's going to send me all of the nominators' email addresses.
Okay.
So I will doodle and feel free to give me your all's availability, starting with Gina, you, Devon, Celine, and me. I think we were the ones who have agreed to facilitate this, Gina taking the lead. So if you want to, let's start with us, a couple of options for next weekend that you're available. And then I'll put those out on the doodle, send those to the nominators, let the majority decide, and then we'll send the recording to the rest who can't make it.
Very good, very good.
Jennifer, I'm completely flexible on Saturday, the 5th,
Is that right? Okay.
completely.
Well, let's maybe just nail that now. Do you want to say 10 and 12 as the 2 options? Or 10 and 2? I'm open too, so.
I'm open too. I can be flexible too.
Maybe 10 or 2.
10 or
How's that work
2?
for you, Celine? I mean, I'll bring up 10 and 2. Okay.
Okay, I'll do 10 and 2 on Saturday, the 5th. Okay,
Love it.
And Gina, I'll check with you to make sure I don't leave any nominator out in terms of getting the emails to send over to Jennifer.
Applicants or nominators?
Jennifer, did you ask me for the nominators' emails?
yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Rita, I will get you the ones that I have. The ones that I don't have, Rita, are some of the newest advisory appointees from the governor.
Those.
You have those, all of them?
Yeah, just
Okay.
make sure I have the complete list of nominators and I'll get all the emails.
I'll send that to you after this meeting.
Okay.
I'll get that out whenever I get the emails. Thank you all so much.
All right.
Have a good weekend.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Okay. Hey,
All right.
Devon, as soon as this meeting is over, I will download the recording. We'll get that recording of this meeting
Okay.
on the website this weekend for those
All
who
right.
want to communicate. Okay.
And Rita, I'll get this to you shortly, okay?
Okay. Thank you,
All right.
Devon.
Thank
And
you.
again, congratulations on Wednesday. I'm so excited.
It was a good day
Yeah.
for West Louisville.
It
It was
is
a really
great
good day for
news.
West Louisville. Yeah, it's exciting. I
It
appreciate it,
is.
Rita. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.